Following up from the last week's episode about 도깨비, we meet another of the most famous of Korean traditional paranormal beings, 처녀귀신. To translate it directly, 처녀귀신 means the ghost of a female virgin. There is the male counterpart called 몽달귀신 too, but their presence is nowhere as dominating as 처녀귀신. Why is that? Why was it considered such a taboo to die a virgin woman? I think it's all to do with the patriarchal society in the past. Marrying and producing the next generation was considered an essential step of life for both genders, but while for men that was just one of the duties of their life, for women marriage and reproduction were the goal of the life and their raison d'être itself. For that reason, should a woman meet an untimely end before they could taste the marital and maternal bliss, that would be basically the fundamental meaning of her life denied, and end up turning into a resentful ghost. In some of the best-known folklores depicting 처녀귀신, these women are all around literal victims of the patriarchal society. Having been killed by a jealous stepmother, lustful suitor, or even an incestuous father, they become ghosts to clear their names and call for a justice. But even then, they often could not act on the revenge themselves, but have to get around to plead to a male authority figure to achieve the justice for them. Whether you agree with the gender role or not, in that social context, 처녀귀신 was considered particularly resentful and often malicious spirits. The fear of them was real enough that there were apparently various superstitious customs when a young woman died a virgin, like burying them in a man's clothing or a doll with a male genital, or even secretly bury them under the road frequented by a male crowd, so as to diffuse their unfulfilled desires. Now, in the modern pop culture, a 처녀귀신 is often depicted as a young woman dressed in a traditional white mourning dress with her long black hair let down. She could be also shedding drops of blood from her eyes or mouth for the maximum horror effect. It has become such an iconic look that most Koreans would think when they hear a word ghost of a woman in a white dress with a long black hair draping over her face. It is actually a widespread image of a ghost all over Asia, from Japanese Yuki-onna to Indonesian Pontianak to Malay Langsuya to Thai Lady Nak. The most famous modern depiction of this age-old image would be Sadako from the Japanese horror flick The Ring. But like most other iconic images of popular paranormal beings in Korea, such as 도깨비, the Grim Reaper, or 구미호, the image of 처녀귀신 is also a modern invention, in this case from the popular film and television series from the 60s onward. By the way, if you don't know what 도깨비, Korean Grim Reaper, or 구미호 are, do check out my past episodes. Link to the playlist is in the description. The description of a 처녀귀신 in early written texts of folklores or stories in the wild is apparently very different. They are often meticulously dressed with a very tidy updo hair and could be almost indistinguishable to a normal woman, probably apart from their slitty, malicious eyes. But when they manifest their true nature, their body and limbs can grotesquely stretch out. They would mimic familiar voices or use various sly tactics to lure their targets, often unsuspecting young children, to possess them. So let's read 3 stories about 처녀귀신 now. The first story is a folklore from Milyang region depicting the archetypal and widely accepted image of a 처녀귀신, and the other 2 are allegedly true encounters with a 처녀귀신 in the wild. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. The new district governor sat calmly in his room into the late night. His eyes were on his books, but on his side was his trusty sword in the reach. The unstoppable rumor was rampant that his predecessors were found dead on the first night of their office. But he wasn't intending to die before he found out what caused the tragedy. Soon came the midnight, and with that the candle suddenly blew out. And in the darkness appeared a woman in a white mourning dress. Her long hair was all down in a mass, and drips of blood were falling from her lips. The governor was shocked, but soon regained his composure. "The dead belongs to the heaven and the living to the earth. Why do you defy the rule and choose to disturb the living? You are the one who killed my predecessors, are you not?" The ghost bursted into lamentful sobs.
"I never meant to harm poor governors. All I wanted was to make my sad case known to them. But before I could speak, their eyes rolled white and their hearts stopped beating at the sight of me. But your Excellency seems to possess a brave heart, and please let me make my plea at last."
Apparently she was the daughter of the old governor 3 years ago. One of his officers was infatuated with her beauty and bribed her maid to lure her out to the remote pavilion one night. He tried to rape her, and when she fought him back and screamed, he stabbed her to death and hid her body in a shallow grave in the bamboo forest. The ghost then pleaded the governor to open a staff meeting the following morning with all the officers present. She then shall manifest as a butterfly and sit on the head of her killer. In the morning, at the staff meeting, indeed a butterfly appeared and sat on one of governor's officers. It didn't take long till he confessed his crime after an interrogation, as well as where he buried the poor maiden's body. When unearthed, her body looked as if she were just sleeping, with all her youthful beauty intact. Only when the governor promised that her murderer shall be punished and prayed for her soul to find peace in heaven, her body finally crumbled into dust. "21 years ago, family members gathered up at Grandma's for a summer holiday, uncles and aunts' families and cousins and all. One afternoon they were all to visit Grandpa's tomb, but an aunt decided to stay behind with her baby nephew because she sprained her toe a day earlier. The son started heading west, and the aunt was preparing dinner for the family. Then she heard a woman giggling outside the gate. Creepy giggles, too. The woman's updo hair was immaculate, as well as her traditional dress, but her slitty eyes were glaring threateningly. Aunt thought she should be some crazy villager, well, every village had one at the time, and gently admonished, "You are intruding somebody else's property. Please leave." But the woman only came closer a step at a time, and Aunt realized something wasn't right. "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman's answer was just creepy giggles. For some reason, Aunt had a hunch that the woman wasn't coming to her, but to her baby nephew sleeping in the room. Aunt turned around to run to the room, but a sprained toe slipped on the muddy ground and she fell. The woman straight past her and, as Aunt expected, headed to the room where baby was. but she let go of the doorknob of the room as soon as she touched it, as if live electricity was running there. She giggled again and talked to somebody.
You can't stop me.
She tried to open the door again, but seemed to be blocked off by some force. The woman then hunched her back like a threatened cat or a fox and glared at the door. Aunt only then realized the woman wasn't human, but some sort of evil spirit, and some other force was defending against her. The woman giggled more, hovering around. Aunt was terrified, but to save the baby, threw pots, firewood, and pebbles at the woman, but she dodged them all and scoffed. While Aunt was a bit lost as to what more to do, the gate opened, and the whole family came back. The woman glared at them for a second, and then disappeared over the fence to the neighbors. Relieved, Aunt bursted into tears and told other family what just happened.
That woman was aiming the baby girl. I tried to stop her, but was so frightened to do anything. But thank God she could not get into the room, as if something was fending her off.
The one word came on to the lips of uncles and other aunts. Dad. In the region was the rumor about evil Cheonyeo-gwisin, the Maiden Ghost, kidnapping or luring little kids to the river or cliff to their death. Nobody can be sure if the creepy woman was the very Cheonyeo-gwisin from the rumor, but at least we believe it was our late grandpa who came to rescue of his baby granddaughter against her. This is a story from my mom's childhood. Her mother, my grandma, also recounted me almost exactly the same, and I believe that gives more credibility to this story. Korean War had just paused, and ordinary people like her family were just settling back once again to a normal life. Mom had lost her father during the war, but the small household of a grandma, mom, and a baby brother could somehow make the ends meet from working on the farming field they had. One summer evening, while Grandma was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Mom was looking after the baby brother in the room. Then she heard somebody calling her name from the outside.
Suga! Suga!
At first it was more like an airy whisper, and she thought she misheard it. But the voice soon grew sharper and irritated.
Suga! Suga!
Mom wondered if it was a friend and went out to the courtyard. What she saw made her gasp. Outside the gate was a woman, an impossibly tall woman. The gate to the house was not very tall, nevertheless her upper body standing well above the gate meant she was at least 3 meters tall. She was carrying a water bucket on her head and was breezily swaying her hips. And that thing was calling out her name. Mom, overwhelmed by the sight beyond the worst of her nightmare, dropped on the ground, but could not take her eyes off the woman. Summer evening light was bright enough to make out the features of the woman. Under the hair done in an updo with a hairpin was an elongated face, slitted eyes so narrow that she could not hardly see the pupils. Nose, mouth, and every feature was sharp, narrow, and stretched.
Suga! Suga! Come, let us play together.
The voice was gentle as the cool summer breeze. but the expression was getting greedier, like an animal about to catch its prey. Mom wanted to call for Grandma in the kitchen, but her dropped mouth could not let out a sound. "Get away, you damned thing! How dare you come in here!" Grandma was a tough woman who survived through the war and maintained her family. She jumped into the storage and fetched a broomstick made with bush clovers, then waved it in the air ferociously. "Get away, you damned! Get away, or I'll whip you into pieces with this broomstick!" The woman started moving away, creepily giggling, but her eyes kept staring at Mom on the ground. Even when she completely turned away, the face and the eyes were stuck towards Mom. She finally disappeared, but the giggle echoed around like a bad smell.
Wait for me, Suga. I'm coming back.
Dear, dear, what was that damned ghost doing here? What a disaster! What a disaster! Grandma said. She hastily went to the privy and scooped up handfuls of dirt around it, and then scattered it around the gate and the door. Mom only learned later that each room of a house are supposed to be guarded by the designated god, and apparently the god of privy is supposed to be most territorial. Dirt from the privy was believed to fend off passing ghosts for that reason. Then Grandma instructed as she handed over the bush clover broom to Mom. "Stay put inside the room. Don't make noise and never ever come out whatever noise you hear from the outside. If that damned thing tries to come in, whip it hard with a broom. Understood? I must go and fetch the monk from the temple in the mountain." The journey up to the temple and back would take good 2 hours. Mom could only lock herself in the room with her baby brother, who was cluelessly asleep. She shivered and sweated at the same time under the blanket. Soon, night fell.
Suga, Suga, come out here, girl.
The ghost's shrill voice rang out.
Come out now, or else I'm gonna get in to get you. Once I get in, then...
The teasing tone of the voice didn't hide a threatening intention. At least it seemed still shouting from outside the gate. Probably for the sake of her baby brother, Mom crawled out of the blanket and grabbed hard of the broomstick with shaking hands. The ghost went silent for a short while. Then the whole house shook for a second. Mom could instinctively feel the ghost was now in the courtyard. Indeed, her voice was now ringing closer, sounding even more sarcastic and teasing.
Suga, Suga, I'll take it to your daddy.
But soon it turned straight threatening.
You promised! You promised! I'm going to rip you apart. I'm gonna shred you.
Now the giant shadow of the ghost swept side to side on the paper door. Mom could only silently cry, praying Grandma to come back in a hurry. Then it was silent once again. Mom knew it was now about to get inside the room. Just then the paper door started shaking. The paper ripped open, and through the hole poked in a large and long hand. The hand swept all directions to grab the first thing that came to contact.
Where's the bitch? Shall I stretch your face out like mine? Shall I pull your arms and legs long like mine?
Mom had now no option but to fight. She whipped a hand with a broomstick and made a retreat. But not long after, the ghost pushed her head in. It shook side to side in a frightening speed and laughed deafeningly loud. Its eyes were shedding blood, and yet its mouth was laughing. And indeed soon Mom could not tell if it was laughing or crying. It was so bursting with anger and resentment that it froze the heart of even the young kid like Mom's.
I'm gonna kill you!
And then she heard the chanting of Buddhist scripture. Namu Amidaba Yada Tagada Yada Tiyata. Death is a part of life. There's no reason to be resentful. This world isn't the only world, dear fair maiden. Find your way to the next world. The monk's chant and rant continued in that fashion, and not long after, the ghost disappeared. Grandma rushed into the room and grabbed Mom in a tight hug. Soon the monk followed and patted Mom's head and consoled Mom gently. But Mom was too much in a shock to react to any of that. "Ma'am, hand me over the girl's skirt," said the monk. Grandma didn't question twice and followed the instruction. Monk said, "Let us move on now. You two come with us, little girl. It's not all over yet." When Mom calmed herself down enough, Grandma piggybacked the baby and grabbed the hand of Mom to follow the monk. He had hung Mom's skirt over the gate and chanted. He then asked Mom, "Where have you been around today?"
"I've been to the hill with the other kids."
Grandma sighed. "God, I told you not to go there." Monk's face turned dark. There are too many of them there. How shall we find it?" On that hillside was a major battlefield during the war, and many lives were lost on the spot, including civilians who were forced to labor. Adults had been warning village kids not to go there, but numerous bullet shells scattered around there were enough to attract kids. They walked the significant distance to the hill in the dark of the late night. Once there, Monk chanted what sounded like a spell to my mom's ears in a low and solemn voice. He walked around a while chanting on, then cried out, "There it is, there it is." Then Mom could hear the ghost's voice again, now mixed with crying.
"I can't go! I won't go! You're killing me twice! No!"
It led the monk to the exact spot. He said, "Time to move on," and mumbled on spells. Then he took out a small stuffed doll out of his sleeve and put it on the ground facing down. "Life is same way ever. Let go of all the dark and cold days, and may you rest peacefully in heaven," said he, and put his hands together and bowed solemnly. That was the end of the long and frightening day for Mom. The monk explained he'd worried that he'd have difficulty to find the ghost among many other wandering lost souls about the hill, but her resentment was so grave it actually made the task easier for him. Whenever Mom recounts the day, she still shakes all over as her trauma hasn't left her yet. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. So by and by, I covered 4 of the most famous paranormal beings from Korea now: the Grim Reaper, Gumiho, Dokkaebi, and 처녀귀신. Their iconic images and presence are, though not entirely of historic origin, still used in many cartoons and TV dramas, and people take one look and just know. A man in black with blue complexion? Grim Reaper. A sexy woman with foxtails hidden under her skirt? Gumiho. A big man with weird color of skin and messy hair? Dokkaebi. And a woman in white with long black hair? That's 처녀귀신, of course. If you are a fan of Korean pop cultures, you will run into some of these images time to time. I haven't quite decided yet, but I think I'll make the next episode with the rest of the stories about Dokkaebi and 처녀귀신 that I left out for the time limit, as I try not to exceed 30 minutes per episode. If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a thumbs up, leave some comments, and consider subscribing to my channel for more. If you are interested in Korean culture or just a fan of weird and scary stories, my little channel won't disappoint. Until the next, stay safe and take care.